What if the battles you think are being fought in the open are not the real battles at all? What if the true contest, the one that decides everything, happens far beneath the surface, in a realm most people never see, and almost no one knows how to enter? You may believe life is a contest of force, of clever arguments, of the loudest voice commanding the crowd's attention. But the Taoists, those quiet architects of the unseen, would smile knowingly at such assumptions. They understood that the most decisive victories are won without a sword being drawn, without the opponent even realizing they've lost until the path ahead is already closed. Look around you. The world moves at the speed of outrage. Every day, 1,000 voices compete for your attention, each one louder, sharper, more insistent than the last. The scroll of your phone is a battlefield littered with provocations, traps, and ambushes disguised as news, opinions, and trending clips. One wrong phrase, one slip of the tongue, and a career, a reputation, a movement can collapse in hours. We live in an era where control of perception is as critical as control of armies once was. And in such a landscape, those who cling to brute force or predictable tactics are outmaneuvered before they've even stepped onto the field. Here is the unspoken truth. In the age of constant surveillance and instantaneous reaction, the only strategy that endures is the one invisible to the crowd yet unavoidable in its effect. This is where Taoist thought enters, not as a quaint relic from a scroll-covered monastery, but as a living, breathing strategy. The Taoist strategist sees what others miss, that to master the game, you must stop playing it on the terms given to you. You move not against force, but around it. You do not attack the opponent's position. You make their position irrelevant. Donald Trump, a figure whose very name divides rooms like a blade through water, operates in an arena where perception is reality. His allies and critics alike acknowledge one fact: he has an uncanny ability to dominate the narrative. But even those who admire his skill often overlook a deeper layer, one that transcends politics and touches the domain of timeless strategic mastery. Imagine if, beneath the spectacle, there lay a blueprint not of confrontation, but of redirection, of letting an opponent's force become their undoing, while your own position strengthens without a visible fight. The Tao teaches us that the soft overcomes the hard, that water wears down stone, not by force, but by persistence and flow. It teaches that the wise ruler does not shout commands from the front lines, but arranges the world so that the desired outcome arises naturally, without resistance. In the same way, a modern figure could adopt this strategy to sidestep traps, to turn every challenge into an advantage, to make opposition collapse under its own weight. Think about your own life for a moment. How many of your conflicts, whether at work, in relationships, or even inside your own mind, have been fought head-on, leaving you exhausted and embittered? How often have you been drawn into arguments you didn't need to have, trying to win against someone who was never going to see your side? The Taoist would tell you, the moment you enter such a battle, you've already lost something more valuable than the outcome. You've lost your freedom to move unseen. This is why you are here, listening to these words. Not for entertainment alone, but because somewhere inside, you feel the weight of wasted energy. You sense that there is another way to live, to think, to move, a way that makes life's chaos bend around you rather than break against you. And perhaps, without realizing it, you've been seeking a model, a living demonstration of such mastery, even in the most unlikely of figures. At Mindset Mastery Hub, we believe that wisdom is not confined to the past, nor to saints and sages alone. The same principles that once guided emperors and philosophers can be applied to the negotiations in your office, the politics of your neighborhood, the dynamics of your family. If you are ready to reclaim the quiet power that does not shout, the control that does not cling, the victory that does not humiliate, then I invite you to subscribe now, not just to a channel, but to a journey. A journey where emotional sovereignty replaces reactivity, where radical self-responsibility dissolves the need for excuses, and where your growth mindset becomes a compass that never fails, no matter how turbulent the seas. Because here is the open loop, the door you've now found but have yet to step through. Once you understand the Taoist strategy, you will begin to see its fingerprints everywhere. In business deals that collapse before they begin, in rivalries that burn out on their own, in sudden shifts of power that seem almost magical in their timing. You will realize that these moments are not accidents, but the deliberate application of an ancient art, the art of shaping reality by moving as the river moves, unhurried yet unstoppable. And when you see it, really see it, you will never be able to return to the old way of fighting again. The Taoist strategist does not merely survive the storms. They become the current that carries others without their knowing. That is what we will uncover together. To understand the Taoist strategy as it might be applied in a modern arena, we must first dissolve the idea that strategy is about the immediate move on the board. Most people see life like a game of checkers, linear, reactive, obvious. The Taoist sees it more like water navigating a mountainside, every drop obeying gravity, yet shaping its own path, finding the cracks no one noticed, wearing down obstacles without visible strain. This is the first key. The Tao does not oppose force directly. It aligns with the natural flow, then bends it toward the desired outcome. Lao Tzu, the shadowy sage who birthed the Tao Te Ching, warned that those who try to control too much lose what they most desire. He urged rulers to rule a great nation as you would cook a small fish, gently, with the lightest touch, because overhandling ruins the meal. In our time, the nation could be public opinion, a market, or even the dynamics within your own team. When Donald Trump engages with his opponents, we often see the visible, flamboyant moves, the public statements, the rallies, the social media presence. But beneath that, there's another layer. Moments of calculated non-interference, of letting opponents burn energy in directions that ultimately weaken them. Carl Jung might call this an act of shadow awareness. To recognize what drives your opponent, not just in words, but in unconscious patterns, is to hold a map of their inner terrain. Jung understood that human beings act from forces they often cannot name. The Taoist strategist studies these forces as a farmer studies the weather, knowing when to plant, when to wait, and when to harvest without rushing the season. In Taoist thought, timing is not about clocks, but about harmony, moving when the pattern invites movement, holding still when the pattern favors stillness. In this way, mental toughness is redefined. It is not the rigid endurance of a wall bracing against waves, but the supple resilience of a reed bending in the wind. Discipline, in the Taoist sense, is not the militaristic grind of willpower alone, but the disciplined attunement to reality as it is, unclouded by ego's need to be seen as winning every exchange. This is where modern man falters, mistaking noise for influence, visibility for control. Viktor Frankl, who endured the unspeakable brutality of concentration camps, wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our power to choose. Taoist strategy is the cultivation of that space until it becomes vast enough to contain all the noise of the world without dictating your next step. This is emotional sovereignty in its purest form, not suppression, but mastery of the inner compass. Imagine a political debate where the opponent expects aggression, where every question is a trap designed to provoke a defensive stumble. The Taoist strategist might respond not with counterattack, but with redirection, a story, a question, even silence, that shifts the frame entirely. The opponent swings at a target that is no longer there, exhausting themselves while the strategist remains rooted, calm, and in control. Marcus Aurelius, writing as a Stoic emperor, knew this truth well. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. The Taoist takes it further, not only refusing to mirror the enemy's tactics, but arranging the field so that the enemy mirrors themselves, revealing their own flaws under the weight of their own momentum. In the digital age, this strategy becomes both more necessary and more elusive. Information moves faster than reason. Outrage outruns evidence, and algorithms reward conflict. In such an environment, the Taoist approach, moving with subtlety, positioning oneself where outcomes flow naturally, becomes a kind of superpower. The modern strategist must understand not only human psychology, but also the psychology of systems, how trends rise and fall, how attention fragments, how narratives collapse under saturation. Napoleon Hill, the early 20th century thinker who studied the patterns of success, warned of the drift, the tendency to be pulled along by currents you do not control. His antidote was definiteness of purpose, the unshakable clarity that prevents you from chasing every ripple on the surface. Taoist strategy embodies this, clarity of intention combined with fluidity of method. You know the direction, but you are not attached to a single road. For Donald Trump, or anyone navigating fierce opposition, the Taoist path would mean recognizing that the fiercest resistance often contains the seeds of its own undoing. The louder an opponent shouts, the more they expose their vulnerabilities. The more they attack directly, the more they reveal their reliance on predictable moves. The Taoist strategist absorbs these blows like water, then turns them, not through brute counterforce, but by altering the terrain until the opponent's energy serves your purpose. This is not manipulation in the cheap sense, it is the art of alignment. You align your moves with the deeper flows, public mood, psychological need, the timing of events, until you no longer need to push. You become like the river whose path carves valleys, not because it fights the rock, but because it never stops moving toward the sea. And here is the challenge. Adopting this mindset means letting go of the hunger for immediate recognition. It means being content to let others believe they are winning, even as the game tilts quietly in your favor. This is perhaps the hardest part for modern egos, conditioned to seek constant validation. But as any Taoist sage or master negotiator would tell you, the most decisive moves are often the least visible. In every age, there are stories that are not merely told but lived into existence, parables that carry more truth than any set of instructions could convey. The Taoist strategist thrives in these stories because they speak in the language of nature, of inevitability, of quiet inevitabilities that no amount of force can resist. Consider the ancient Chinese tale of the farmer and the boulder. A massive stone blocked the village's only water channel. The people came with hammers, ropes, fire, anything they could find to shatter or move it, but each attempt ended in exhaustion and broken tools. Weeks passed, crops withered, tempers frayed. Then the old farmer, a man no one thought of as a leader, began digging. Not at the boulder itself, but a narrow trench around it. Day after day, with no fanfare, he widened the channel until the water flowed freely again, bypassing the obstacle entirely. The stone remained exactly where it had always been, but it no longer mattered. The lesson is not subtle, yet it is profound. Sometimes the most decisive act is not to destroy the obstacle, but to make it irrelevant. In the political arena, in business, in personal life, there will always be boulders, opponents entrenched in their positions, narratives that seem immovable. The Taoist strategist, like the farmer, asks, must I move this at all, or can I simply make it obsolete? History gives us other mirrors. When Hannibal crossed the Alps to confront Rome, he did not batter himself against the Roman navy's dominance at sea. Instead, he brought his army over an impossible mountain route, arriving where no one thought he could. His genius was not only in courage, but in refusing to fight on the terms his enemies expected. The Taoist would nod here. To move unpredictably is not chaos. It is to refuse the game as it is rigged. In more modern terms, think of Muhammad Ali's rope-a-dope strategy against George Foreman. Ali spent much of the fight leaning against the ropes, letting Foreman's punches expend themselves, absorbing the force while conserving his own. Then, in the later rounds, when Foreman's arms were heavy, Ali struck with precision. This is water wearing down stone. It is the patient art of letting the opponent destroy themselves. Now, let us translate these images into the realm of Donald Trump and the Taoist lens. Imagine a moment where his opponents launch a series of attacks designed to corner him into a defensive stance. The common impulse would be to meet each charge head-on, to counter every accusation with equal force. But the Taoist approach would be different. Instead of reacting to each blow, he could let the narrative run its course, intervening only when the moment was ripe, redirecting the conversation into territory where his position was naturally strong. In this way, the boulder remains, but the current of public focus has shifted elsewhere. Carl Jung might describe this as letting the shadow reveal itself. When an opponent is left unchecked in their aggression, the deeper motivations, pride, insecurity, hidden bias, begin to surface. The Taoist strategist allows this unveiling, knowing that the audience will see more than the attacker intends to show. The victory here is not in winning an argument, but in letting the other side expose the limits of their own truth. There's a story from Zen tradition about a young monk who challenged the master to a duel of words. The monk prepared clever arguments, rhetorical traps, and sharp rebuttals. When the duel began, the master simply asked the monk to pour him tea. As the cup filled, the master did not signal for him to stop, and tea spilled over the edge. "Why did you not stop?" the master asked. The monk replied, "You did not tell me to." The master smiled. And so it is with your mind, overflowing with yourself, leaving no room for what is needed. In political life, as in personal growth, the overflow of self is what often undoes a person. Too much ego, too much certainty, too much noise, and the cup spills. The Taoist strategist knows that sometimes the best way to win is to simply let the other person keep pouring. This is why deeper symbolic narratives matter. They are not entertainment, they are maps. They teach us to look for the currents beneath appearances. They remind us that the boldest move is not always the most visible, that the audience's perception can be shaped not by confrontation, but by quiet inevitability. And here is the reframe I want you to carry. The Taoist strategist is not in the business of erasing opponents. Erasure is a brittle form of victory. Instead, they are in the business of rearranging the field so that opposition becomes part of the movement toward the strategist's goal. Every push against you becomes a pull toward your intended outcome. Every attempt to box you in becomes a step toward the door you want them to walk through. In this way, the Taoist path is deeply empowering. You are no longer at the mercy of chaos because you see its shape. You are no longer forced into battles because you choose the terrain on which they occur, or whether they occur at all. And that is not just politics. That is life. If you are still with me in this exploration, know this. You are not just hearing strategies for someone else's benefit. You are absorbing an architecture you can use in your own conflicts, your own negotiations, your own moments of being underestimated or misjudged. The invitation is here. Keep going, and we will translate these symbols into the ground beneath your own feet. Philosophy without application is like a map without a journey. It may inspire you with possibilities, but it will never change your reality. Taoist strategy comes alive only when it is carried into the arena of everyday decisions, where its subtleties must face the raw friction of human interaction. And here is where we begin to see that the same principles that could guide a political figure in the national spotlight can also serve the person navigating the quieter, but no less intense, challenges of their own life. The first truth to absorb is that Taoist strategy begins with restraint. In a culture that equates speed with success, silence with weakness, and patience with irrelevance, this is nothing short of radical. Restraint means you don't react to every provocation. You don't chase every opportunity. You don't answer every criticism. It means you let the noise of the moment pass. Not because you are passive, but because you are protecting your energy for the moment that truly matters. Donald Trump, whose career has been marked by periods of calculated visibility and calculated absence, demonstrates that stepping back can be just as strategic as stepping forward. Now, bring this closer to your life. Think of a workplace disagreement where someone is trying to corner you into a defensive stance. The common reflex is to respond immediately, to prove yourself right in the moment. The Taoist approach would have you pause, not out of fear, but to see the larger flow. Is this a real challenge, or is it a ripple that will vanish without intervention? Could responding now draw you into a battle that drains more than it gives? Taoist timing is not about delay for its own sake. It's about acting only when the pattern favors you. Second, Taoist strategy values position over force. In military terms, this is the high ground. In social terms, it is moral and narrative advantage. If you have positioned yourself where your values, skills, and public perception are aligned, you can allow challenges to come without destabilizing your foundation. For a public figure, this might mean staying rooted in a consistent identity, even when opponents try to redefine them. For you, it might mean building such clarity of purpose that gossip, misunderstanding, or temporary setbacks cannot shift your direction. Napoleon Hill called this definiteness of purpose. But Taoism adds something Hill did not emphasize: fluidity. You can be fixed in your direction without being fixed in your form. A river may always flow toward the sea, but it will change course 1,000 times along the way. Donald Trump's public persona has shifted many times over the decades, from real estate mogul to reality television star to political leader. but each shift maintained the core image of dominance and control. This is not inconsistency. It is adaptation in service of a larger through line. The third integration is learning to let others expend themselves. This is where the rope-a-dope of Muhammad Ali and the old farmer's bypass come together. In modern terms, it might mean letting an opponent take the spotlight for a time, knowing that overexposure often breeds fatigue or backlash. Social media, in particular, rewards the rapid rise and punishes the inevitable plateau. The Taoist strategist can step aside during an opponent's peak, allowing them to spend their energy and draw attention until the public begins to seek a new focal point. That is the moment to re-enter, with timing that feels inevitable rather than forced. This principle applies equally to personal life. If someone is determined to prove you wrong, there is power in letting them keep talking until their certainty begins to crack under its own weight. The Taoist strategist understands that not every confrontation must be won in the moment. Some are won in the silence that follows. Fourth, Taoist strategy thrives on reframing. A direct attack on your position can be transformed into an opportunity if you shift the context. Imagine a debate where you're accused of avoiding tough questions. Instead of answering defensively, you might respond with a story, a question, or an unexpected angle that reframes the exchange entirely. The opponent's strike lands in empty space, and the audience's attention moves toward your chosen point. This is not evasion. It is redirection toward ground you have prepared. And here we find the deeper implication. The Taoist strategist does not live in constant reaction. They cultivate anticipatory awareness, the ability to see not only what is, but what is likely to come. In politics, this might mean sensing the mood of the public before it hardens. In business, it could be noticing market shifts before they are obvious. In your own life, it might be recognizing the early signs of burnout, conflict, or opportunity so you can adjust before they peak. Applying this requires discipline, but not the brittle, punishing kind that burns you out. It is the discipline of mindfulness, of staying aware of the moment without being consumed by it. Marcus Aurelius practiced this as an emperor, journaling each morning to anchor himself in perspective before the noise of the day arrived. You can do the same in your own way. A quiet reflection before meetings, a walk without your phone, a deep breath before answering an email that stirs your emotions. When you begin to live in this way, you discover something almost magical. Opposition stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like part of the terrain. You stop seeking to crush it because you realize that, like rocks in a river, it is shaping your path in ways that ultimately serve your journey. The Taoist strategist doesn't fight the current, they use it. And in the larger public sense, a figure like Donald Trump could embody this not by softening his brand, but by using the flow of opposition to reinforce it. Every attack becomes proof of his influence. Every attempt to corner him becomes a moment to expand the narrative. The specifics may vary, but the underlying mechanics are the same ones you can use in your life. Position, timing, restraint, and the art of letting others spend their energy first. Every journey worth taking changes you twice. First, in the moment you see the path, and again in the moment you realize you've been walking it all along. The Taoist strategy is not a set of tricks you pick up and put down like tools in a box. It is a shift in perception, so complete that the old ways of reacting, forcing, and defending feel as outdated as weapons from a bygone war. Once you see the world through this lens, you can't unsee it. Look back at the ground we've covered together. We began in the chaos of modern life, where noise masquerades as truth and speed is mistaken for wisdom. We walked through the still corridors of Taoist thought, where the water wears down the stone, where the farmer bypasses the boulder, where the master lets the opponent overflow their own cup. We watched how these ideas could live in the hands of someone navigating a high-stakes arena. Trut, whether that be a president on the world stage or you in the quiet politics of your own day-to-day life. If there is one thread tying all of this together, it is this. You do not have to fight to win. You have to see clearly enough to know when to step aside, when to advance, when to let the current carry you, and when to redirect it. The Taoist strategist holds the paradox of softness as strength, invisibility as presence, patience as power. In a world obsessed with immediate impact, this can feel counterintuitive, but it is precisely why it works. The transformation begins when you stop seeking constant validation from the crowd. You no longer need every argument to end with applause, every move to be understood, every step to be visible. Instead, you start playing a deeper game, one measured not in minutes and headlines, but in years and legacies. For Donald Trump or any public figure, this could mean reshaping the very battlefield so opponents exhaust themselves on ground that leads nowhere. For you, it might mean refusing to let the small dramas of life dictate your mood, your focus, or your choices. And this is where the invitation comes. Not to agree with every example we've used, but to take the architecture beneath them and make it your own. If you have felt the pull of these ideas, if you want to walk through life with the same calm, unshakable clarity that allows a person to outmaneuver challenges without even appearing to try, then I invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to this channel, not as a casual viewer, but as someone committed to building emotional sovereignty, radical self-responsibility, and a mindset that bends with the wind, yet stands through the storm. This is Mindset Mastery Hub, a place where ancient wisdom meets modern clarity, and where every lesson is another step toward mastering the only battlefield that truly matters, your own mind. Before you leave, let me offer one final step forward. The strategy we've explored here is not complete without understanding the image you present to the world and the archetype you inhabit in the minds of others. The next chapter in this journey will take you there. It's titled Donald Trump's Image Management and the Persona Archetype, and it will reveal how perception itself can be shaped, strengthened, and aligned with your purpose. Think of it as the next layer of the invisible architecture, the one that ensures not only that you move with the current, but that the current carries exactly the image you choose to the shores you intend. Watch it now, because once you see how the persona operates, both in yourself and in those who seek to influence you, you will never again be manipulated by the masks people wear. You will understand the stage, the lighting, the costume, and how to step onto it as the character you were always meant to play. The river is moving. The current is yours to shape. Let's continue.